Now, you asked about identity, and I used the example of a child's game, but I could go through an identity. So I do this particularly in maps of meaning. And so, for example, let's say I'm sitting typing. Okay, we could decompose my identity. So at the highest level of resolution, I'm moving my fingers. And so that could be my identity. I'm the thing that moves its fingers. And then at a slightly broader level than that, I'm typing words. And at a broader level, I'm typing phrases and thinking them up, and then sentences, and then paragraphs, and then chapters, and then, let's say, full papers or books. That's a productive unit. So I'm the author of a book or the author of a paper. That's an identity. But then that's nested inside, for me, it would be nested inside being a clinical psychologist, being a professor, being a good citizen. And then that's nested inside something that's even broader than that. And I would say that that's nested inside a cultural heroism. And I don't mean that specific to me. I mean that for everyone. That's the outermost level, whether you're playing out the role of hero or adversary, say, that's the highest possible level of identity. That's the level at which fundamental morality is adjudicated. And there isn't really anything beyond. Outside that it's beyond us. It's the transcendent itself. And you're all of those at any one time. You're all of those levels of identity. But those are all practical, right? So those are the roles that you're playing in the world. All of those are a consequence of who you are. But in interplay, like in this situation with the child, all of that's negotiated with other people. And so if you have a functional identity, when you act it out in the world, then you get what you want and need. And if an identity doesn't do that, well, then you either retool your identity or you retool the world.
Your conception of the world?
Well, if you're retooling your conception of the world, then you're retooling yourself. No, you can actually, what a revolutionary does is try to bring the world into alignment with
literally
their
change
theory.
The world.
Yes, literally. Well, and we all do that to some degree because we are practical engineers, not only do we perceive the world, but we also interact with it so that it does manifest itself in accordance with our desires. There's limits, obviously, to how far you can go or how far you should go with that. And what are the limits? Well, there's practical limits. Nature won't do what you want it to unless you're very sophisticated in your application of your knowledge, and other people will object. So now you might say, well, you should forge forward regardless of their objection. And, there are circumstances under which that's true. But generally speaking, that's not a very good idea. It certainly doesn't make you popular as a child. And so that brings up one other issue. I would also say, and I developed this idea quite a bit in the new book. You go from egocentrism as a child, you have to go through this period where you're socialized as a child and adolescent. And that really means that you allow your identity to be molded and shaped by the group. And, you think about how important friends and peers are to children and adolescents. Your mother will say when you're a teenager, well, if Johnny jumped off the bridge, would you too? And you say, well, no. But the real answer is, well, probably. If all your friends are there taunting you, you would, in fact, jump off the bridge. And not only that, generally speaking, you should. Because it's your duty. It's your developmental duty as a child and a teenager to take your isolated self and turn it into a functioning social unit. Now, you could say, well, Peterson wants everybody to be a functional social unit, a robot, a cog in the wheel. And I would say, well, that isn't where development stops. It has to go through that period before you can emerge as a genuine individual, which means you have to know the rules of the game before you can break them. But not being able to abide by the rules is not anything like being a genuine creative individual. Those are not the same thing. And there's plenty of attempt to confuse the two things because it's much better if you can't follow the rules to view yourself as a avant-garde revolutionary than as a failure. And it's not like I don't know that social molding crushes. Obviously it crushes, and everyone feels that. These are existential problems. Everyone deals with the tyranny of culture and the fact that it does want you to be a certain way and not other ways, and those ways might not be in keeping with the deepest elements of your nature. Well, tough luck for you. Because you're also the beneficiary of culture. And so you have to offer it your pound of flesh. Now, you shouldn't do that at the expense of your soul, but you shouldn't stay an immature child either. Okay, and so this notion of identity that we're being fed is very, very, it's very thin.
What are we being fed? Be very specific.
Well, there is the idea, for example, that your identity is whatever you say it is and that everyone else has to go along with that. No, that isn't how it works, partly because no one even knows how to go along with it. Like, let's say, just for example, that you're gender non-binary. Okay, what am I supposed to do about that? Man, I don't know. I hardly know what to do if the rules are already there. So let's say I grow up, being a heterosexual male, I want to find a woman, fall in love with her, raise a family, have children, have grandchildren. That's a game. I know the rules to it, not well, because everyone's a failure at that. You know, it's very difficult, but at least you kind of know what the goal is, and so does the person you're with. Well, you leap out of that, which is already terribly difficult. You leap out of that into completely unknown territory, saying that I'm presenting yourself as something other than those categories, leaves everyone around you and you completely bereft of direction.
Let me put it in words that I get from your material. So what I heard you just say, tell me if I'm wrong, is part of the negotiation that we do from the time we are little kids and figuring out that play, we're up on the bridge, we jump maybe because we want to, fit in with our peer group. There is a sense of order to that. Now, you've been very careful, and it would drive me crazy if people respond to this interview as if you have not already illustrated that it is the balance between two opposing forces. But so we need enough order so that somebody can find their way through the world, and that I think a big part of the reason that your work has resonated so profoundly with people is they are left in a world where they don't know how to move forward in a way that serves them spiritually, practically as well, for sure. And so, hey, everybody.
Both of those practically shades into spiritually as you move up into the broader reaches of identity. And look, see, one of the things, I really laid this out in Maps of Meaning. It took me a long time to understand that belief regulated emotion. So what happens is that if you act out your identity, if you act out your beliefs in the world, and what you want doesn't happen, what happens is that your body defaults into emergency preparation for action. And the reason for that is you've wandered too far away from the campfire, and now you're in the forest, and maybe you're naked. And so what do you do then? And the answer is, well, you don't know what to do. So what do you do when you don't know what to do? And the answer is you prepare to do everything. And the problem with that is that it's unbelievably draining psychophysiologically. Like, it hurts you. And there's an immense physiological literature detailing the cost of exactly that kind of response. And so people and animals, people stay where what they do has the results they want. That's partly why you want to be around people who share your cultural presuppositions, is because you know that, for example, even in small ways, let's say you're a country music aficionado and you're hanging around with your cowboy hatted buddies and you throw on a tape and everyone says, great tunes, man. And you're happy about that. But, you throw on a piece by Tchaikovsky and you're in a different subculture, and who the hell are you? And the people in your group will say, man, who listens to music like that? And that's a trivial example in some sense, but I believe it's one that everyone can resonate to. We like it's very hard on us not to be where we know that what we want is going to happen. We hate that. We hate that, and no wonder. So, and then, there are varying degrees of that, obviously. You can really be where you don't know what's going to happen, or you can only be there to some degree. But by and large, we're conservative creatures, even if we're liberal in temperament. We can't tolerate that much uncertainty. And you might ask, well, why? And the answer is, well, because you can be hurt. Pain, you can be damaged, you can become intolerably anxious, and you can die. So it's no wonder you're sensitive. We're very sensitive to negative emotion. And so our identities, functional identity regulates your emotion. But you do that in concert with other people. In the first chapter of the new book, Beyond Order, the rule is don't casually denigrate social institutions or creative achievement. That's that balance again. I make the case that most of your sanity.
Okay, I want to dive in here, and I'm going to see if I'm tracking all of this, because I'm putting this in a larger context of this really matters, and it applies directly to something that's happening in the world. It seems to me that you don't dive into things unless they have real relevance. So is it fair to define identity as the self-narrative that emerges from a nearly infinite number of interactions with other people and nature itself?
Well, I would say yes, but that gets to the point, it's so broad, it's almost, it starts to lack definition.
So I can take it finer than that. I am trying to sort of find the borders, and then I will work in. Okay, so if we still remain true at that point, then having in the book, you walk through a lot of some of the people that you've done psychoanalysis with. And so we get a lot of insights into the actual people that you're dealing with and how people can begin to tell themselves a narrative that is very dysfunctional. And you help them out. I don't want to say easily, because that sounds like it cheapens it, but pretty straightforward in helping them reframe. And framing is something I'm obsessed with. And so our identity is based on this. It's a self-narrative that we tell ourselves based on the interactions we have with other people and nature, such that we begin to solidify a set of behaviors that make sense for us based on the goals that we want to achieve and where we're trying to go. Am I still good?
Yes. Well, you improved your definition by adding the behavioral element, because I would say the fundamental element of identity is what you act out. On top of that, there's the story that you tell.
Do I have to be consciously aware of it?
Well, you're consciously aware of some of it, not of other elements of it. You can't be consciously aware of everything you do.
And does the conscious and conscious alike make up my identity as you define it?
Your identity is the story you tell about your actions in the world, but it's also your actions in the world.
Okay. Now,
it's both of those.
Why does my identity, and I assume as I understand it, why does my identity as I understand it matter to the course of my life?
Because it's the structure of it's the structure from which the plans that you implement in the world originates. And you're always acting in the world. You have problems to solve all the time. And you have to solve there's all sorts of problems you have to solve to stay alive, and you have to solve them for today, but you have to solve them in a way that works for today, that doesn't screw up tomorrow too bad and leaves next week intact and next month and next year. And so there's a continuum of you. So that's the other reason why your identity can't just be you, or how you feel right now, because you're not only who you are right now and how you feel right now. You're this strange entity that exists right now, but that already existed in the past and that is going to repeat itself into the future. And so you're actually a community of individuals stretched out across time. And the plans that you implement have to be beneficial for that entire community of individuals. And it's going to be the case that there isn't much difference between you acting properly with regards to your extended temporal self and you acting properly in relationship to other people.
That's interesting.
So you're stuck with society just because you know that there's a future. You're stuck with society even if you're solipsistic, right? If you think you're the only conscious. consciousness that there is, there's still the fact that you have duration across time, and that, you have to take into account what the consequence for your actions is going to be on the 50-year-old Tom and the 80-year-old Tom